Hey, David McGuffin here. Welcome to Travel Talk Tuesday, February the 21st, 2023. As you can see, I'm still home here in Middleburg, Florida in my kitchen. Thank you guys for joining in tonight. We've participated the last couple of weeks. Valentine's Day was last week, and I did kind of a romantic destination Travel Talk Tuesday. And then the previous week, thank you guys for all joining into that too. But we're back live again here. And tonight we're going to talk multifaceted information. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing with exploring Europe. I'm going to talk to you about a special recipe I'm preparing tonight called Confit de Duck or Confit du Canard. And I'm going to show you that. And we have a special guest, Molly Silver, who will be with us here in just a few minutes to talk about some tours here in the United States. And then finally, I've been working and learning how to use Google Earth Pro and got a couple of game controllers and joysticks. So we're going to begin a walking tour of Dublin City that I'm preparing for an upcoming or for all my tours this year. And so I've been working very hard on that. And so I think I'll have about 10 minutes of that to show you tonight as well. So that's our agenda. But before we get too much further, let me go ahead and share my screen and talk to you about this duck leg cooked in its own fat and how I do it. So even though tonight we're talking about Dublin, it's important to know that Ireland has some of the best restaurants in all of the world. Many people used to think that Irish food was just plain and not very good. Maybe 200 years ago, that was the case, but not any longer. You can go to any town in Ireland and you can find Irish pub food, which is fantastic, like lamb and salmon and fish and chips and all of that kind of stuff, especially all that good hearty home cooking, what we call comfort food. But there are plenty of other ethnic restaurants around as well. I love to go to Asian restaurants abound, especially in Dublin and Galway. But some years ago, gosh, at almost the turn of the new millennium, I discovered a restaurant in Dublin that's a French restaurant down in the basement of a building right on Stephen's Green. And the restaurant's name was La Mère Zoo. And La Mère Zoo, I think, is my Aunt Zoo's kitchen is actually where it was. And it thrived until, gosh, about 2015. And I would go there every time and have an authentic French meal, whether it be, what we're going to do tonight, Duck Confit, or whether it be some sort of casserole or cassoulet. And unfortunately, they went out of business. But I fell in love with French food there, of course, in Paris as well. But there, because I could always get a little variety here in Dublin. So this is one of the dishes at La Mère Zoo. The previous one before that was also there, and it was a cassoulet. A cassoulet is always like a bean. Let's see, I can go back here a little bit. Well, it's even out of focus because I guess the photo's from an old camera, but it's a cassoulet, so it's a bean and tomato base with some kind of meat in it as well. Well, tonight, I'm cooking duck leg fried in its own fat. So here's a duck leg fried in its own fat I had in Dublin just last year. So how this begins is I had to order that duck legs, and it came in a tin. It's going faster than I had thought. It came in a tin, a round tin, and you might can see it on the stove back here in the back. It's sitting there, and in the tin had 4 duck legs and a whole lot of fat. As a matter of fact, they're 3/4 full of duck fat in there. And so I did a test cook last night, and we're going to have this for dinner tonight as well. My test cook last night was really good. But this, I got it on Amazon, and it came and the legs were about $6 a leg, which is a pretty fair deal, I think. So I've got that, and so let me let this run and tell you a little bit about what I did with it. There you can see a photo I took last night of the duck in its own fat. And so I took it out of there, I put it on the grill, and I put it on there, and I just browned it on both sides because it comes cooked. So I browned it on both sides, and then I finished it in the oven at about 450 degrees to let it really brown up. The only thing I put on there was salt and pepper and a little tiny bit, about a tablespoon of the fat. And there you see it. I served it last night with au gratin potatoes, which is right there, a French meal, and the haricot vert, which is green beans, and the duck confit. And it was wonderful. And we're going to repeat this process tonight with Leslie and I, and at least one of her daughters is going to have some of it as well. So before I get into what we're going to talk about tonight as far as Dublin City Tour, I want to talk to you about my friend Molly Silver. She and I became acquainted back in 2017, 2018, something like that. And Molly, we had a mutual acquaintance here in Jacksonville, and I found out that she was a tour guide and was very well-versed in leading tours in Italy. And so I asked her to lead a few of my tours in Italy back pre-pandemic. Well, the pandemic settled in and we all did hardly anything, but Molly continued to diversify, and she has come up with her own tours where she now lives up in St. Mary's, Georgia. So I'm going to turn the show over to Molly and ask her to join in and talk to you a little bit about Molly's Old South tours from Georgia. Okay, Molly, thanks for being on tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me, David.
Hang on just a minute. Here we go.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for having me. So yes, I'm excited to be here. So I want to show you the tours that I have on offer so that after you get back from a tour in Europe with David, maybe you'll still have the travel bug and want to do some more traveling in the Southeast.
Okay.
So a little bit more about me. So I'm originally from Jacksonville. I graduated from college with a degree in art history. But there aren't many jobs in art history. And so I decided to move to Italy because I wanted to be a tour guide. It could have been a bad decision, but it actually worked out. So I got my master's in Renaissance art there. And then I started working for different companies like David's over in Italy, giving bus tours. And obviously all of that was up until the pandemic. I moved to St. Mary's around the time of the pandemic. And I hope I'll show you tonight how surprisingly, there's a huge amount of history in this area. And so it's really fun to talk about. So I'm going to jump into my tours here. Let me share my screen. And if y'all have any questions, I do think there's a little comment box, right, David?
Yeah, a chat box or anything, and you can give the questions and we'll feed them to Molly as she's talking.
Okay.
This is a webinar and not a meeting, so not live interaction, but we certainly can, you can type it in and we'll get right back to you. And if you're watching on Facebook, you can do the same thing and we'll shuffle those questions to Molly.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So these are the 3 different tours that I'm offering. I think you should be able to see it. I have a Cumberland Island walking tour. That's a national seashore here off the coast of Southeast Georgia. And then I have a St. Mary's history walking tour here. And also one that seems to be very popular is my St. Mary's Murder, Mayhem, and Martinis tour. And I wonder why that one's popular.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about them each in some detail and maybe pause after each one to see if anybody has any questions. Okay. So we'll start first with the St. Mary's walking tour. So St. Mary's was founded in 1788, which actually makes it one of the oldest cities in Georgia. And so it's got a lot of history, more than people expect. And so on the walking tour, it's an hour and a half. I start by the water. I don't know if y'all know that the St. Mary's River is actually the waterway that divides the state of Georgia from the state of Florida. And so looking across the water here, you're actually looking at Florida. And of course, the Spanish were in control of that territory in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And so that posed a big threat to the people of St. Mary's. And so on all of my tours, I talk about different attacks and raids that the Spanish carried out on the locals of St. Mary's, just because they were sitting ducks basically right there across the water from St. Mary's. And then we move up the main drag, Osborne Street, and you can see that there's evidence of war right here in downtown St. Mary's on the main drag. You see this cannon here that was most likely a Spanish cannon that was taken from a Spanish ship when it was shipwrecked. So that just gives you an idea of how much turmoil this town did see. It also saw a lot of prosperity. It was a major port town, since it was a border town with Spanish Florida. But then if we look at the building behind the cannon there, that's the Riverview Hotel. Such names as Rockefeller and Carnegie stayed at that hotel because they had connections with nearby Cumberland Island. But I don't like to talk about them. The person I like to talk about is actually a cartoonist, and we can see Roy Crane's cartoon here. So Roy Crane, he stayed at this hotel in the 1930s, and he drew a lot of the people and places that he saw while he was here. So he actually put St. Mary's on the map with his very popular cartoon. And so we get to look at that cartoon here inside the hotel. It's really fun to see all the landmarks of town almost 100 years ago.
Huh.
And then one thing I'm really proud of about my tours, I get special insider access to certain places like the Riverview Hotel and this B&B as well. This is the Good Bread Inn. It's a beautiful Victorian house, and you can see the elegant interior there. So I just talk about the history of that house. We look at the beautiful decorations, the incredible heart pine floors. So it's fun to get that insider look into St. Mary's, and you never know, you might just want to stay there someday. And then farther up the same street, we have the oldest house in St. Mary's. This house dates from 1801, so that makes it about 220 years old. And you're probably wondering who the guy is on the screen. That is Aaron Burr. Now, we probably all know about the musical, but we know from that most likely that Aaron Burr killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. So Aaron Burr, after that, fled south. And we believe that he stayed at this house on his flight south. And so I get more into detail on that. I talk about the man who owned this house. His name was Archibald Clark. He and Aaron Burr were friends. And Archibald Clark was trouble prone. He was taken prisoner during the War of 1812. I'll talk later about the fact that he was involved in a murder later. So lots of issues with Archibald Clark, but they make for great stories on this tour. And then nearby is the beautiful First Presbyterian Church. This dates from 1808, so also really old. It's actually the oldest church in St. Mary's and the second oldest church building in Georgia. This is another church that we get to go into together as a group. And the crazy story that I tell at this church is that there was a horse in the bell tower of this church a couple of centuries ago. I know that seems unbelievable, but come on a tour with me and you'll hear about how that actually went down.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And then one thing I like about this tour is I kind of take you off the beaten path. So this is to the side of the church, some beautiful headstones of people buried here next to that Presbyterian church. Even locals don't really know about these burials here. So it's fun to find, uncover secrets of downtown St. Mary's together. Now, across the street is this incredible house called Orange Hall. This was built by the priest of this little Presbyterian church. So how did he get his money to build this 10,000 square foot house? Well, it might have to do with some underground tunnels that used to be underneath this house. I won't go into much more detail, just know that there may have been some nefarious things going on. So once again, a juicy story, but another gorgeous building in downtown St. Mary's. So just to finish up on that, this is Marja, who's the owner of the Good Bread House, one of those bed and breakfasts that we get to go inside. This just shows you how friendly the locals are. You can see the saying over her door says, "Enter as strangers, leave as friends." And I feel like that's what happens on this tour. The locals are just so happy to have us, visiting town. And they're so friendly. Sometimes the tours run long because the locals just get caught up talking with us. And so you'll just see when you come on a St. Mary's tour, what a quaint, open, friendly town this is, and such incredible history if you're interested in that. So that's just a little rundown of the St. Mary's walking tour. I don't know if we have any questions yet.
We've got quite a few people watching, but I don't see any questions popping up at the moment.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. So we can go on to the next tour. So the Cumberland Island walking tour. So each of these two tours, the St. Mary's tour and Cumberland Island tour, I offer every day. So the St. Mary's tour is in the morning and Cumberland Island is in the afternoon. So I actually have a lot of people who take both tours all in one day, because then you get a really good sense for the history of the area. But so Cumberland Island, as I said, it's a national park. It's a national seashore. The only way to get out there is by ferry. And so that makes it very remote. The number of people allowed on the island is limited each day to just 300. It's the only national park that limits how many people can come on the island. So when you're out there, it could be you don't even see another soul besides wild horses, and we'll talk about that. So yes, I offer this tour every day from 12:30 to 2:30. It's a leisurely walking tour showing you the Dungeness area. So that's the south part of the island that was owned by the wealthy Carnegie family, of steel fame. And so we start with thousands of years ago. I mean, the Native Americans were first on Cumberland Island 4,000 years ago. That's who you see on the left, the Timucua. And then the Spanish took over. You see them in the middle in the 1500s. They tried to convert the Timucua on the island. And then the British took it over from them in the 1700s. So once again, here on Cumberland Island, lots of turmoil too, lots of juicy stories. You'd be really interested to know why the French specifically, before the Spanish ever got there, were interested in establishing trade on Cumberland Island. They didn't settle, but they wanted the sassafras there. And the sassafras, I'll just say it this way, went to cure a certain unmentionable disease. And so you'll find out much more about that on tour with me. But then we start getting into some really interesting people. So we're looking at Nathaniel Greene here. Y'all may know him as a great Revolutionary War hero. He actually acquired half of Cumberland Island, and this is the incredible 30-room, 4-story mansion that his wife built on Cumberland after his death. So that's the first impressive Dungeness mansion. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist today, but there are such incredible stories associated with Nathaniel and his wife that it's really worth talking about on the island. But then, of course, we've got to talk about the incredible Carnegie Mansion. You sort of build anticipation as you go through the beautiful wrought iron gate here until you reach this incredible 59-room mansion. And of course, it is in ruins today. You can find out why it is on my tour, but you can see that feral horses just have a run of the island. You see one here. And then you see them in all different kinds of terrain on the island in the maritime forest, and enjoying the grass around all of the picturesque ruins here. So there's about 150 wild horses on the island. It's a huge attraction for people. And it really does make the island a magical place. It seems like you're entering another world when you go there. And so, of course, we talk about how the horses got there, how they're doing today. But it's just so fun to watch them enjoying the island along with you. And then, of course, we go around to different terrains as well. You have the incredible ruins that we talk a lot about, but then we have live oaks that are hundreds of years old. Actually, supposedly the live oak that was harvested from Cumberland Island went towards building old Ironsides, the USS Constitution up in Boston. So, our wood went towards a prominent landmark in American history, but then you have incredible marshes here, as you can see on your bottom left as well. So an incredibly diverse ecosystem for such a small island. It's just 18 miles long, but so much to see. And then we don't just have the Carnegie ruins. This is just to give you an idea of a couple of other buildings we talk about. On the top left is the Tabby House. This is the oldest building on the island. It dates from 1800. Nathaniel Greene's wife built it. And then on the bottom right, it's hard to realize how huge that building is, but that is a stable that would have housed 60 horses for the Carnegies in the late 1800s. So basically a mansion for their horses. Yeah. And then this house is still in really good shape. This is the Grange. This is a 2,700 square foot house for a servant of the Carnegies. So he was the overseer of the Carnegie mansions on the island. And you can see how well the Carnegies were doing if the servant had a house like this. And you can see the beautiful wallpaper on the inside. So this is something else we get to look at on our tour. Now, something we don't have time to include, but that you should always include on a visit to Cumberland, I recommend it for after the tour, is going to the beach. Cumberland Island has a 17-mile long beach, and it's totally undeveloped. So that means it's the largest undeveloped beach on the Atlantic coast. And you see the white sand. We have the beach morning glories here. Often you have wild horses there on the dunes as well. I just saw some on the island yesterday. So once again, just this enchanting otherworldly kind of place. And so that's all I wanted to tell you about the Cumberland tour. Just to me, it's an incredible package of fascinating history, beautiful architecture, unparalleled nature, these wild horses that just enhance the scene as well. So I describe this island as enchanting, and I ask people on my tours to come up with another adjective that they think might work better, but everybody kind of agrees with me. This island is just enchanting, and I hope that if you come out to the island, you'll feel the same way. All right.
I have a question, and that is, I know you take a ferry out there. How long is the ferry ride out to the island?
Yeah, the ferry ride is about 45 minutes. So the only way to get to the island is from St. Mary's. And they've got a couple of options for you to get out there at 9 o'clock and 11:45, and it'll take you 45 minutes. And then starting in March, they're going to have 2 different ferries coming back in the afternoon. Over the winter, it's been just one. But now from March to October, you're going to have a lot more chances to get back and forth more easily.
And when you arrive on the island, the tour that you give is a walking tour on the west side of the island. Is that correct?
Yes, it's on the south side. Yes, I offer a walking tour on the south side. So there's a dock there, the first dock you come to on the ferry, called Dungeness Dock, and that's where we meet. And that's just about a half mile from these ruins that you're looking at. So it's an easy walk over to the mansion. And then on my walk, on my tour, it's a leisurely stroll. I find benches wherever I can in the shade. So I actually consider it easy, even though there is about a mile of walking overall on the tour. Okay. Great. Right. I don't know if anybody else has any questions yet.
I kind of answered or asked a couple of them in that. So I think those are answered, but the walking tour was the duration of it. So it's 2.5 hours or so, about a mile walk.
Yes, it's 2 hours. And the
hours.
reason why I make it a 2-hour tour at the time I do from 12:30 to 2:30 is a ferry arrives at 12:30 and we can start right when the ferry arrives.
Okay,
We'll have time
got
for
it.
restrooms and water. And then I end at 2:30 because then there's a 2:45 ferry
Got
back
it.
to St.
Okay.
Mary's. So anybody who wants to be there just a short time, get a sense of the history and then come back without getting too tired.
Mhm.
That's an easy day.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
All right. All right. Thanks. So one more to talk about here. And I saved the most exciting, I think, for last. Everybody sort of gets all aflutter when I talk about murder, mayhem, and martinis. So on this tour, I offer this every Thursday evening as a group tour. But if you ever want to get a private group together, I offer the tour any day, anytime. So I talk about real murder stories on this tour. You'd be surprised how such a small town that seems very peaceful today has had so much action. So lots of murder and lots of just general chaos. And then, of course, there are martinis. So at the end of the tour, I've gotten us a deal where you can get happy hour price drinks at the saloon in downtown St. Mary's.
Mhm.
So this is an hour and 15-minute tour, short and easy, but really action packed. Lots to talk about. And so we do talk about, once again, this oldest house in St. Mary's, the Archibald Clark House, but we talk about a whole different story here. So I told you that Archibald Clark was associated with a murder. This was all in conjunction with the War of 1812. So Archibald Clark was taken prisoner during that war. And this was all because he was the customs officer of town. So of course he was in control of a lot of money. And so the British were interested in him for that. But then after the war, as one of his workers went out to retrieve the customs money, something terrible happened. And so, of course, we go into much more detail on that during the Murder and Mayhem and Martinis tour. We talk about Orange Hall again, but once again in a different context. So there's a man associated with this house named Daniel McGirt. And I don't know, David, if maybe you've heard of him before. He's sort of an infamous character in our area. He was known as a nefarious villain in his day during the Revolutionary War, a big time bandit. And so all these legends grew up around him because he was just so feared because he was a really good bandit. And so he actually married a lady from St. Mary's. He ended up living in St. Mary's as well. So once again, our town has an association with a pretty colorful character.
Right. So I think there's a creek named after him here in Jacksonville, I believe.
Very nice. Yeah.
McGirt's Creek, right?
Very good. Yeah. So actually the Ortega River used to be named, I think McGirt's Creek, but now there might be like a little extension of it that's called that.
Exactly.
There's McGirt's Boulevard in Ortega because supposedly he had, the Spanish had granted him some land in that area. So he, had what's today prime real estate in Jacksonville back in the day. So yeah, good job recognizing that, David. So yeah, connections with Jacksonville, but connections with St. Mary's as well, which you may find unexpected. So this is another beautiful house in St. Mary's from the early 1800s. The owner of this house was shot in the back in downtown St. Mary's and died in this house the next morning. So what are the circumstances of that? Who shot him? What happened to his killer? You got to come on the tour to find out.
We'll do it.
All right. And so this is another beautiful house in St. Mary's from the Victorian era, so late 1800s, early 1900s. But the story associated with this house is that the company who owned this house in the 1970s, it was the Gilman Paper Company, for those of you who are local and may know about the paper mill that was in St. Mary's up until the early 2000s. That company is actually associated with an assassination plot in the 70s. So, much more recently than you may think. Everything else we've been talking about was from centuries ago. This is basically yesterday. And so there are a lot of interesting twists and turns in that story. It really just seems unbelievable, actually. But I promise I'm telling you the truth when I talk about the crazy events that happened associated with that assassination plot. So this is looking down Osborne Street. So that's the main drag in St. Mary's, where all these beautiful buildings that I've been talking about are located. And Osborne Street is named after a founder of St. Mary's. Henry Osborne was an interesting character in his own right. He's part of the mayhem aspect of the tour because some really crazy things happened to him, but he brought them all on himself, so it's hard to feel sorry for him. But we talk about a couple of major incidents that both happened in the same year that actually caused him to fall from grace. Henry Osborne was the Chief Justice of Georgia at this time, but he lost that position and was impeached because of these couple of really bad things that he did. So we go into detail about that as well. And then we end at the river. And here, we're looking at a beautiful sunset scene of St. Mary's. It's wonderful to walk along the water here and look at the beautiful views and the beautiful boats. But what I ask my guests to imagine here is, as you're walking along this river, imagine you see one of these boats on the river aflame. Well, that's what happened here on the St. Mary's River back in 2012. 2 people died as a result of this fire. Wow. And it was started, well, I'm not going to go into detail once again, but it was started by nefarious means. So once again, you think of murder and mayhem as being, all way in the past, but that is not the case at all. This is a story from 2012. Yeah. And so, the peaceful little town of St. Mary's may not seem so peaceful. And then it's drinks time. So we go to Siegel's Saloon, which is just right across the street from the river. It's a really fun environment. And so as I told y'all before, the saloon offers drinks at happy hour prices specifically for our group, and so everybody loves going in there to get drinks after the tour. You can stay for dinner, you can see TVs there, they have live music, so it's a really fun environment. And so I think that is all I have for y'all. Here's all of our information. And one thing I wanted to mention. So David, I think, is getting this set up right now, but if you book a tour with him, then on your confirmation email that you get, you will receive a code to get 15% off of any of these tours that I talked about. So as I said before, go on a tour with David, keep that travel bug, and then come on a tour closer to home with me, and you can find all my information there. And I think that's all I have. So
okay, yeah, Molly, thank you so much. A couple of questions come to mind as well. If some folks want to come up there and stay overnight, are there? I know you saw a few B&Bs that you advertised, but are there hotels or anything nearby?
A little bit. So I talked about the Riverview Hotel. That's actually connected to Siegel's Saloon. They have 18 rooms there, so it's pretty small. The Good Bread House is that cute B&B I talked about. They have 6 rooms. And then there's just one more B&B in town. That's the Spencer House Inn. They have 14 rooms. If you stay, so that's all there is in downtown St. Mary's. If you stay about 5 minutes from downtown, there is a larger Best Western. And Kingsland, the next town next to us along 95, they got a bunch of hotels. But if you're wanting a cute little quaint historic hotel, you're going to find just one of those 3 hotels or B&Bs in downtown.
Yeah, so I was thinking in my mind as you were going through all this, St. Mary's is just an hour and a half away from where I live here south of Jacksonville, and
Middleburg, yeah,
it would make for us who live in North Florida especially a great outing to go up and do both of your tours during the day, finish up with those martinis, stay overnight, and come back home the next day. So if any of you guys are in North Florida looking at that, we can get a caravan to go up there and visit with Molly and do some of these tours. Would be a wonderful outing and excursion from, get out of the big city of Jacksonville.
That's a really good idea. I get a lot of people coming just for the weekend from Jacksonville, from St. Augustine. It's a great little easy trip that just takes you to a whole other world. So
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we're going to put up the information on at davidmcguffin.com and begin to promote Molly's tours up there in St. Mary's. And, Molly's also, as I mentioned earlier, she's helping me with the planning aspect of the trip and of the tours that I'm doing all year long, and also with some of the tour guiding in Europe as well. So we look forward to a continuing relationship both in St. Mary's and across the ocean in Europe as well with Molly. And so if you do have any more questions, you can contact her there at her Molly's Old South at gmail.com. Of course, you can find it here with me, and we'll put up a little section on our webpage about that too. And we'll also link it in this Facebook Live feed as well. So Molly, thanks so much for being a part of this tonight. I've got 10 minutes to share of just one little segment of Dublin, and that's going to end up Travel Talk Tuesday for tonight. So you're welcome to stay on there. I'm going to start sharing my screen and get this segment taken care of. Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to watch. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you. So while Leslie's getting this all set up, this is the first time I've ever had two moderators on here. So we're getting set up with my little video coming up here. And we're talking about a walking tour in Dublin that I'm designing. I've been going to Dublin for 30 years now. And the very first time I developed a printed walking tour was back in 2004. And, it was very up to date back then, but gosh, Dublin has changed so much in the past 20 some odd years. And with public transportation, light rail going through the town, a tram line going through the town, and buses and everything else. So it's just amazing what kind of change. So I've decided to totally revamp everything on my tours. And this is the first segment of it that deals with the big main street going down through the main drag of Dublin. So let's see if all this works. This is the Lewis train, the tram line that goes through the middle of town. It began and first opened in 2002, but now it is totally expanded throughout the whole city. It's there is a driver, and a lot of it is on the street.
So my suggestion is hop on the red.
And so I'll let David on the video tell you a little bit about it.
North across the Liffey and up O'Connell Street. Get off at the top of O'Connell Street Upper. Then go ahead and cross the street and head uphill toward the tall, slender spire of the Abbey Presbyterian Church. That's about 400 meters up the street. Walk up the left-hand side of the road beyond the Gate Theater, and you'll find the Garden of Remembrance on your left. Enter the garden and feel free to walk around while I tell you about this place.
This is all Google Earth Pro that I'm experimenting with. Kind of cool, like flying a drone around.
Was once a pleasure garden connected to the nearby Rotunda Hospital. In 1966, 50 years after the Easter Rising, President Eamon de Valera officially opened this memorial garden to commemorate the lives of all those who died during Ireland's struggle to gain independence. It was designed to be a place of quiet remembrance and reflection. Additionally, it is constructed on the spot where some of the Easter Rising leaders were held before being carted off to kill Mayhem jail and their execution. Have a look at the reflecting pool. The pool is in the shape of a cross to recognize Ireland's Christian heritage. There is even more symbolism here. Notice the wavy mosaic tiles emulating the island's many rivers. At the bottom, find ancient weapons, a sword, a spear, and a shield, designed to represent the old Celtic tradition of breaking weapons and throwing them into the water as an offering to the gods to end hostilities. The bronze statue at the end of the pool describes a pagan legend of four siblings in the agonizing process of changing from mere mortals to swans. The sculptor, Owen Kelly, used this well-known fable to couple visually with W.B. Yeats' poem Easter 1916, with the famous line, "All is changed, changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born," prompting us to reflect on the atrocities of war and the birth of the Irish nation. Nearby is a bronze plaque with the words of another poem titled "We Saw a Vision," penned by Liam MacUstin in 1977. In the darkness of despair, we saw a vision. We lit the light of hope, and it was not extinguished. Later on in the poem, closing out, it says, "The vision became a reality. Winter became summer. Bondage became freedom, and this we left to you as your inheritance. O generations of freedom, remember us, the generations of the vision." Another notable event happened in May 2011 when Queen Elizabeth II visited the Garden of Remembrance. She laid a wreath and bowed her head at the foot of the statue. One can only imagine her thoughts at that moment, perhaps thinking of the rebel boys who were executed and their impact on the United Kingdom and the Irish. In retrospect, it was a unifying moment that, over time, healed many of the pent-up pains and wounds of the Irish. Now finally, let's look up at the Irish flag. This tricolored flag became a unifying and official symbol of the Republic in 1937. Green for the Irish, orange for the Protestants, and white for the hope of a lasting peace between the two. Exit the Garden of Remembrance.
Normally in Ireland, the wind is blowing like crazy all of the time. And I went back through 20 years of photos to try to find the flag flapping in the breeze there at the Garden of Remembrance and did not find a single one. So you saw what I did. I had to, what do we call it, Photoshop one in, but you get the idea of the green, the white, and the orange, all connecting the people of Ireland together, and white being the unity and the peace that lies between the two. We're almost through. We got one little more thing to look at, about 2 minutes.
To the right of the Children of Lear statue. You may need to climb the stairs and exit onto Parnell Square North. Across the street is the Irish Writers' Center. This small museum, with only 3 rooms, features the history and works of some of Dublin's noted writers. If you are into writing and poetry, it's worth a quick look. Admission is about €8.
You can tell I haven't quite learned how to fly that artificial drone to get everything, but you get the idea. There you see the whole Garden of Remembrance and the descriptions that I just talked about.
Turn left and walk to the corner, turn right again, and head downhill.
So my concept is to continue. I've got on the real tour that I'm developing, whether it be visually or audible, is to make it real time so that you can see and experience this while you're walking around the city of Dublin. I'm going to divide it into 2 parts, one on the north side of the Liffey, the other on the south side of the Liffey. So I'll modify my Travel Talk Tuesdays the next couple of weeks. I'm talking about Ireland the next 2 weeks because we're heading out to Ireland on the 14th of March and going to be there at St. Paddy's Day in Dublin and in between and other areas where we go, Kilkenny and also Cork and Blarney and Galway and the Cliffs of Moher and Dingle Peninsula and everything else. So the next 3 or 4 weeks are all dedicated to Ireland tours. And finally, before I close out, I've been, Charlotte and I have been spending quite a bit of time the last, month, and Leslie as well, going to the travel and adventure shows all over the United States. We've got 7 shows all over, and we've completed shows in Chicago and Washington, D.C. I was in L.A. Charlotte and I were in L.A. last weekend, and then we'll be in Denver, Colorado at the Colorado Convention Center this coming weekend. And it's a Friday and Saturday show. And we showcase our tours. We stand at a booth and talk about David McGuffin's Exploring Europe all day long and how we are so much better than any other tour company and what we do a little bit differently than all the others as well. So if you are in those areas, please reach out to me. If you're on my mailing list, you're getting that information. If you're not, look at davidmcguffin.com, go to the bottom footer and sign up for our email, and you'll be alerted of where we are and what's going on. We've got, as I said, Denver coming up next week, and then we have a travel show in March and April in Dallas and in Atlanta. So we'd love to have you join us on that. So until next week, thank you guys for watching tonight. Until next week, your adventure starts right here with David McGuffin's Exploring Europe.